All right, hi everyone. So today we're going to be going through the regional training mapping process. So I'll give a brief overview on the actual process itself, the templates and toolkits that we have available, and what a good example of presenting the outputs would look like. So starting out the process, the first couple steps here will probably look pretty similar to the curriculum assessment, as the first steps of the regional training mapping process are to perform an actual curriculum assessment. So step one really just involves pinpointing those key manufacturing programs that you want to use for evaluation. And then we move straight into step two, which is the educator's self-assessment. So after identifying which programs you want to use, identifying the educator stakeholder contact, and having them run their own curriculum assessment. Then step three, we'll move on to assessment validation. So educators will validate the program curriculum self-assessment with both ISPs and educators. So they kind of come together in a meeting and just go over the results, see if anything is off, make sure everyone is aligned. And then we can move on to step four, which is actually inputting the curriculum assessment results into the regional mapping view. And then from there, after the assessment is put into the regional mapping view, recommend that we then discuss with manufacturers, see if they feel like it aligns as well, and kind of get a little bit of a better idea of how we want to start addressing some of those curriculum gaps. Moving to step five, develop regional action plan. So based on the conversation with manufacturers, educators, and ISPs, ISPs will develop a plan for filling training gaps and addressing oversupply. So the ISPs and educators will work together to create that action plan. It'll be an iterative process. And then from there, they'll move on to actually implementing the said action plan based on highest priority needs. And those will be outlined within the actual action plan itself. And so it's up to educators to implement the action plan kind of agreed upon by ISPs. Alrighty, so now we have a good overview of the process and we're ready to dig into the actual regional training mapping template. So like all of our templates that we have available for our use cases, it starts with an instructions tab, goes over what is regional training mapping, how to navigate the workbook itself, what you need to conduct regional training mapping, and then a detailed overview into how to fill out each tab column by column. You'll see it here for both the entry and mid-level tabs, and then kind of how to understand these resulting breakdown tables after filling out the program assessment. So that is there for your reference here, but we can actually just jump into what the actual regional mapping tab looks like. So we have two tabs in terms of actual mapping content. So one is for entry level here, and then one is for the mid-level. Something important to note is you actually only need to input any relevant curriculum information into the entry-level tab. All of the curriculum content here will automatically filter into the mid-level tab, and just our calculation basically just changes the column from referencing the entry-level column to referencing the mid-level column. So you'll only have to fill out the entry-level tab with any of the curriculum assessment results that you had already had. We'll probably, for sake of conversation, will be a little bit easier to look at this example tab that we already have filled in. So should look pretty familiar. We have all the competency content here on the left, which occupation level is the KSA relevant, and then the resulting criticality. And then looking here, the actual only columns that will be filled in manually by you would be columns K and columns M. So this is if you haven't performed the curriculum assessment, but at this point, you've most likely performed a curriculum assessment. So you'll actually just go ahead and copy and paste in all of the results from the curriculum assessment directly into this tab within columns K and L. So as you can see, we had all of this dummy curriculum information pulled in. So see, we got exposure, and then the resulting criticality for the entry level was medium. So since we have exposure and medium coverage, we have a keep as is recommendation. So that'll be the same. So that each column, K and M, are two different curriculums, and this is what kind of a regional roll-up view would look like. So as within the region, we're saying that these two curriculums belong to the same region. And as you go, if you find that you want to add more curriculums, do more evaluations within the region, you just add columns after here, kind of just copy and paste these two columns and add in more to cover additional curriculums throughout the region. And the result of entering in all this information is this regional roll-up view, recommendation view. So these recommendations should look pretty familiar based off of the curriculum assessment results. So basically at a KSA level, line by line, we have a breakdown of how the different curriculums throughout the region fit within terms of levels of coverage. So we can see here that this KSA, knowledge of geometric dimensioning and tolerancing, we had keep as is for curriculum 1 and assess demand as curriculum 2. So if we look at our regional roll-up view here, we can see that we have 50% keep as is and 50% assess demand. So this is just a good way to see line by line across the region how a KSA is being covered. So that is the regional mapping entry template tab. So like I said, high-level summary. All you have to do within this tab is copy and paste in your curriculum assessment results. And then all of this will auto-populate. One thing to note, however, though, is as you go through and add more curriculums, you may find that you have to update the references within this actual roll-up view. But that's just kind of a note for as you go. All right, and so like I said, the mid-level is the mid-level tab is very similar. But the mid-level tab is very similar. All of the information that you populated within this entry-level tab will auto-populate in. So as you can see, we have for curriculum 1 in the entry-level tab, we have the exposure and thorough at the KSA that we've been referencing. So if I go back through to the mid-level tab, I should see, exposure and thorough coverage for the same line here. The main difference is now within the next column over, we're referencing that mid-level criticality, which at this point, this is not a mid-level relevant KSA, so we're not going to see any sort of program recommendation at this level. But if we move down, when we didn't see any sort of program recommendation at this lower KSA level, now that we're referencing our medium or our mid occupation level and mid criticality, you can see that we do have a recommendation for this actual specific row. And then same thing, same kind of breakdown here on the right-hand side of our regional roll-up view. The one thing that I will mention for both the entry and mid-level tabs, you can actually scroll all the way down to the bottom of this book here, and you'll get a breakdown very similar to one that you see in the curriculum assessment of kind of where average, like all the programs fell across the region. So that will be this grid view here that will auto-populate as well. And that's also at the bottom of the mid-level tab. So you can use it for entry or mid-level summary recommendations. All right, so now that we have filled out our regional mapping template, what are some good ways to actually display the results and kind of have those conversations with educators and ISPs and manufacturers to show the results of our regional training mapping assessment? So this is one example. So we saw that grid view that auto-populates within the Excel itself. So from there, you can actually copy and paste this regional roll-up view from the regional training mapping template to a slide and kind of list out topics as bullets that had a large percentage of KSAs that fell within a specific recommendation type. So for example, looking at this prioritize inclusion box here, go back through the regional training mapping view and find those most common topics that fell within the prioritize inclusion category across the regional training mapping. And do the same thing for your probably top 3 to 4 largest percentages. So that's what you'll see here. That's how you would update it. You may have to like change the color codes of each recommendation based on how it auto-populates. But that is one example of a very high level results summary. The second type of summary output slide is a slide that breaks down the grid component by component. By recommended action. So for example, this is a prioritize inclusion guide. So you'll see on the left-hand side, we have the grid copy and pasted from our summary grid shown on the last slide, all of the relevant topics within the grid as well. And on the right-hand side, just giving some information on how to break down and interpret this data. So the first category would be like, how do I actually interpret this? So based off of the percentage, based off of the topics involved, like what is this telling me about my regional training programs? And then looking down to that middle section there, how can I use this to begin action planning? So what can I use the specific data for to then go ahead and turn around and make my action plan for my region with educators? So a little bit of information will be put in there revolving what some potential action plan steps could be specific to these results. And then just lastly, like what else is important for me to know? So for example, here, like a topic is missing from curriculum with like X out of X programs not covering it. So finding like those most critical training gaps across the entire region and kind of summarizing that information here. Utilizing these summary slides will just make the action plan planning a little bit more straightforward and just kind of really summarizes the results that go into that regional training mapping template. That's all I have to cover here today for the regional training mapping template, toolkit, process, everything like that. If you need any additional information, please go ahead and dig around on the OMA landing page. We have all of our toolkits on there. We have additional recordings from our use case 101 sessions, a lot of good stuff in there. So feel free to dig in. Thanks.